Hello and welcome to StudyIQ. I am your friend Rahul Saigaonker, and today's agenda of our discussion is India's space research and development. When we talk about India's space program, I can say that it began rather modestly in 1962 with the establishment of INCOSPAR, a committee for space research and development. 7 years later, formally ISRO began in 1969. ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, since 1969 has grown leaps and bounds. If we talk about some of the top space agencies in the world, ISRO's name would be present there along with NASA, JAXA, European Space Agency, Chinese space agencies. You name any agency, ISRO can compete with them. ISRO will stand shoulder to shoulder with them. ISRO, since 1969, has developed its own satellite launch vehicles. We have developed our own cryogenic engine. We have reached the moon. We have reached the Mars in first attempt itself. That's why I told you our program, space program, has grown leaps and bounds. There is no doubt in it. But there is something missing, something peculiar thing that we miss in our space program. I'll just push you or nudge you towards that. Right? Whenever we talk about some of the private companies, say we have heard about the Elon Musks of the world. We know about Jeff Bezos of the world. We know Richard Bransons of the world, Paul Allens, Robert Bigelows of the world. But we seldom hear about the Ambanis of space, the Adanis of space, or the Tatas of space. That means in terms of commercial applications, or I can say in terms of business, there are many big names from India who have acquired some foreign companies. But why private sector has not grown in India? And now, hopefully, going forward, we can see some of the names in the coming decades at least. Why? A long overdue thing has now been achieved. Recently, the cabinet has approved the Indian Space Policy 2023. ISRO has recently released this, and you can see here, ISRO is going to focus on R&D, that means research and development. Now, the limits have been drawn. That means what is ISRO going to do? What is the commercial work, or what is the commercial engine of space research? Who is going to be the regulatory body? What is going to be the policy? It has been clarified. So we are going to discuss about this India Space Policy 2023. In fact, let me begin with a very simple kind of a question. In fact, this discussion is going to be rather factual. Right? That's why the question is also very simple. Discuss the salient features of India's Space Policy 2023. All right? In this, you'll get very good fodder content to write this particular answer, because we are going to dissect the policy. We are going to talk about different agencies or different institutions and what would be their role in space research and development going forward. Let's begin our discussion. But before that, there's a small message for all of you. You do know that our prelims to interview batch 3 has begun on 22nd April, but just the initial orientation classes are over. Even now you can join. 26th April is the closing of the admissions. All right, so do join this course, because we will be hand holding you from prelims till your interview, and if you clear prelims 2024, all the expenses going forward would be borne by StudyIQ for your entire mains preparation. All this you'll get it at this particular price. Do use the code Rahul Live if you want heavy discounts on these courses. I'll see you in the class very, very soon. Right, let's begin our discussion. As I told you, now, the government has been bringing a lot of space reforms. As I told you, since 1969, since the beginning of ISRO, there was too much of government sway in the space research and development. Yes, of course, in 1990s, Antrix Corporation did develop as a commercial arm of ISRO, but everything is with ISRO. If you need anything, you need ISRO, right? So that was a kind of policy we had. That means complete space was under the public domain. That means with the government itself, a lot of government control over it. But since last 6 to 7 years, I can say that the government has been bringing a lot of space-based reform. In fact, in 2020, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that India's space sector reforms going forward are going to stand on 4 particular pillars. He enunciated this. First one, he said that we are going to promote private players. He said that private players will have freedom of innovation going forward when it comes to space sector. The government, of course, it is going to play a role, but it is going to take a step back. Or I can say that the government and the private sector both will run the space program together. The government will act as an enabler. The government is not going to hinder the growth or the private sector growth. It is going to push the private sector further. Apart from that, in terms of employment, in terms of preparing the youth for space program. That is also one of the third pillars. And the fourth pillar is quite simple, that the space sector is going to be used for the betterment of all. These are the four pillars which the government announced in 2020, and now recently they have cleared the Indian Space Policy 2023. Here the role has been clearly delineated. Now you can see a very small policy. In fact, I would say Indian Space Policy 2023, it's about 10-11 pages document. If you're preparing for the exam, do go through this once so that you get very good content regarding India's space policy. But in this video, you'll get ample fodder or ample content here, because I'll be talking about everything. I'll be talking about in space, I'll be talking about the non-government entities, Department of Space, NSIL, everything. So let's directly jump into the policy. What is the vision of the policy? Every policy needs a vision. Now the vision is quite clear, that we want to augment our space capabilities. We want to encourage the private sector. We want to encourage international collaborations. In fact, this policy also talks about space-based diplomacy, where India is going to pursue international relations also. Space is going to be used for diplomacy as well. So, of course, we are going to focus on space research, space-based development, space-based application, ultimately helping the common man and the country overall through development of international relations. And yes, nations socio-economic development as well. And we also want to use space for peaceful purposes, not as a means of offense, but for peaceful exploration. This is the vision. We also have a strategy. Now, our strategy has 5 pointers. What are we going to do? First of all, we are going to go for advanced research and development, which still continues, but right now there would be one entity which is going to pursue this particular thing. That means R&D for one particular institution. Then we are going to provide goods and services of space. We know about communication satellites, we know about remote sensing, so many satellite based applications, and those would be provided to people. Apart from that, private sector is going to be the driver here, and the government is going to enable them. And for that, the government has already created InSpace. Now the role of InSpace has been clarified as a regulatory framework. Apart from that, we are going to promote more and more startups, education based on space research, and overall technology development is going to be done through this space research itself. So this is going to be our strategy. Now, clear delineation has been done. As I told you, the top agency or the nodal agency which is going to oversee the entire policy is, of course, Department of Space. You know that Department of Space comes under the purview of Prime Minister's office, and the overall policy and its implementation is going to be guided by the Department of Space. That means policy outline, everybody's job, the nodal departments, the implementation, to clarify or to interpret any of the provisions of this policy, everything would be done by Department of Space. It is going to be like the top tier body, right? Like the oversight body. Next would be, of course, ISRO. We all know ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization. But now the job of ISRO has been focused. Before, we always used to talk about who is going to be the regulatory authority. Say, for example, I want to launch a satellite, or if I want to start a space-based company, who do I go to? Where do I go? Do I go to PMO? Do I go to ISRO? Do I go to some other body? Now we have clear-cut delineation of these jobs. ISRO is going to purely focus on research and development. Now its primary job is going to develop cutting edge, I would say bleeding edge technology in terms of space applications. So they are purely going to focus on R&D. Now the question arises, so who is going to regulate them? The regulator would be InSpace. Now we all know in 2020, the government established InSpace, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Now this is going to be a single window for all the clearance based activities. In fact, for the private sector, yes, but even for the government based activities, InSpace is going to be the authorization center. This is going to handhold, guide and authorize all the space based activities in the country, be it public or private. For example, I want a license. Tomorrow, I want to set up a space station. I want to set up a launch pad. I want to start my own startup, right? Say space-based startup. I want to create rocket engines. I want to create a rocket body. I want to start my own company. Just go to InSpace, apply here. Everything would be done through InSpace, and InSpace is going to focus on ease of doing business. They are going to promote ease of doing business. They are going to promote the private sector in our country. So a clear-cut job has been given to InSpace as a regulator. Now, if you ask me, what can I understand? In fact, InSpace is going to be the major body now in India for any sort of approval, and not the ISRO. ISRO is going to be simply for R&D now. ISRO is going to focus only on R&D, everything with InSpace, right? Apart from that, private sector body NSIL has already been created. You know, in 2019 itself, NSIL was established. Since 2020, it has started production also. We also know that they have till now made 2 successful launches of the SSLV, Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. So NSIL, it is going to be responsible, or it is going to be the private arm of ISRO. It is going to be a public sector undertaking under the Department of Space, right? Till now, it was under the control of ISRO, I can say, but now it is under the Department of Space directly, and it will be responsible for commercializing the space technology. We all know what NSIL does. NSIL is going to focus on commercial applications of space. Say, for example, if a private company wants to launch its own satellite, they can give an order to NSIL. NSIL is also going to manufacture or satellite which has been launched. It can be leased, or whatever technologies, etc. Those things can be taken or done. The work can be done through NSIL. So this is going to be the private arm or the commercial arm. So clear-cut delineation: Department of Space, ISRO, InSpace, NSIL, and now the focus is also going to be on non-government entities. Now here, non-government entities can directly go and get approval or licensing from InSpace. Then they can start their own work. For instance, now space-based communication services can now be leased out even to non-governmental entities. We all know we do have DTH services. They have been leased, right? Be it the geostationary orbit or the non-geostationary orbits, that means the low Earth orbit or the medium Earth orbit satellites, they can be leased for communication to the non-governmental entities. We all know the launch pads are only available at Sriharikota, or the satellite centers, whatever ISRO uses, like the TTC Earth Station satellite control centers. Now the non-government entities can also create and operate these things. They can use Indian orbital resources for communication. They can directly go and file. They can directly go and do filings with the International Telecommunication Union. So the private sector has been given a greater freedom for innovation, for creating more startups, for taking the space program forward. So now it is going to be government and the private sector going hand in hand. So that's the basic policy, and of course this policy applies to entire union and its territory, also to the exclusive economic zones across India. That's the basic idea behind Indian space policy. What has been the response to this? There has been a lot of positive response for this. Industry leaders have welcomed this policy and they have described this policy to be very futuristic. As I told you, in 21st century, some big names are missing. We only talk about some of the big businessmen from the West who are some of the big names in space research, right? But Indian names will soon come up, and this policy is going to take our space program forward, where both will be partners, the public sector, the private sector. Let's hope that we get more and more services from space. Our space research and space development excels further. Let's wait and watch for this. If there is any news on this, we'll talk about that again. But hopefully you already understood what are the salient features of our space policy. That's it in this particular discussion. Thank you for watching this video. And if you like this video, or if you want the PDF of the Indian Space Policy 2023, you can always follow me on this particular ID. I'll share that on my Telegram channel with the same name. You can also contact me on Instagram. I do respond on Saturdays and Sundays. Thank you for watching this. Jai Hind.